In November 2001, Indian scientists pulled a piece of wood from the floor of the Arabian Sea. They sent it to 3 separate laboratories. All 3 came back with the same answer: 9,500 years old. That wood came from a site that Sonar had already shown contained what looked like walls, streets, a drainage system. Geometric structures arranged in patterns that don't occur in nature, sitting 120 feet underwater, 20 kilometers off the coast of Gujarat. 5 months earlier, the Indian government had stood in front of the world and announced they had found a lost civilization, older than Egypt, older than Mesopotamia, older than anything in the history books. And then, almost nothing happened. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just what the record shows. And the reason why is more complicated and in some ways more unsettling than a cover-up would be. Let's go back to where this actually starts, because it doesn't begin in 2001. It begins in the 1930s with a search for a city that most of the world considered mythology. In Hindu tradition, Dwarka is one of the holiest cities that has ever existed. According to the Mahabharata, one of the great Sanskrit epics, it was the kingdom of Lord Krishna, a city of beautiful gates and towers built by the divine architect Vishwakarma himself. And the Mahabharata doesn't just describe it, it describes the day it ended. An eyewitness account, attributed to the warrior Arjuna, of watching the sea rise and swallow the city whole. Streets, buildings, everything gone in minutes. The ocean then became, as the text describes, as placid as a lake. Scholars filed that under myth. Then in 1983, a marine archaeologist named S.R. Rao decided to look anyway. Rao ran 12 underwater expeditions over 7 years for India's National Institute of Oceanography. What his team found off the modern coast of Dwarka in 3 to 6 meters of water was not nothing. Dressed stone blocks, semicircular fortification walls, more than 120 stone anchors, a fortified foundation covering over a square kilometer of seabed, matching the location described in ancient texts almost exactly. A 1st century Greco-Roman navigation guide called the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea had even recorded a dangerous but important port in the same area, independently from the other side of the world. Mainstream archaeology accepted Rao's work. The coastal Dwarka ruins are dated to roughly 1,500 to 3,500 years old, real, excavated, and published in peer-reviewed journals. His 1999 book, The Lost City of Dwarka, made him something of a legend in Indian archaeological circles. But here's the thing, this is not the discovery that made headlines in 2001. What happened in 2001 was something else entirely. And if you're drawn to stories that official channels quietly step away from, you're going to want to stay with this one because this is just the foundation. In December 2000, a team from the National Institute of Ocean Technology, an engineering body, not an archaeology department, was running routine pollution surveys in the Gulf of Khambhat, a bay further south along the Gujarat coast. They were using side-scan sonar, sweeping the sea floor for environmental data, and the sonar returned something they were not looking for: geometric structures, arranged in regular patterns, sprawling across an area kilometers wide, at a depth of 30 to 40 meters, far deeper than anything Rao's team had found. Far older, if the depth meant what they thought it meant. The Gulf of Khambhat sits in a geologically active region. At the end of the last ice age, roughly 9,000 to 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose globally as glaciers melted. Low-lying coastal plains flooded. River valleys became sea channels. If settlements had existed in this region before that flooding, they would now be exactly where the sonar was showing these features, 120 feet underwater, 20 kilometers from shore. The lead consultant on the survey was a man named S. Badrinarayanan, formerly of the Geological Survey of India. He believed what he was looking at was real, and he went up the chain. On May 19, 2001, India's Minister for Science and Technology, Murli Manohar Joshi, stood in front of cameras and made an announcement that ricocheted around the world. His team had found the ruins of an ancient civilization in the Gulf of Khambhat, a settlement with regularly spaced dwellings, a granary, a bath, a citadel, a drainage system, older than the Indus Valley civilization, older than anything previously known on the subcontinent. If true, it would be the oldest urban site ever discovered on Earth, by thousands of years. 3 days later, the Indian press reported something the initial coverage had missed. The discovery had not actually been dated yet, and the structures Joshi had described looked to some researchers more like Harappan features from 4,000 years ago, not 9,500. That correction was buried. The headline had already traveled the world. But if you think that's where the story breaks down, wait, because it gets significantly worse from here. In November 2001, NIOT returned to the site and pulled material from the seabed by dredging. Not by diving, not by controlled excavation, by dragging equipment across the floor of one of the most turbulent tidal environments on the planet and collecting whatever came up. They sent a piece of wood, some pottery shards, fossilized bones, and a tooth to 3 Indian laboratories. The wood came back at 9,500 years old. That date hit international media in early 2002. BBC reported it. National Geographic reported it. Graham Hancock, the British author who argues for lost prehistoric civilizations, told the BBC that nothing else on this scale was known anywhere in the world. But here is the problem that was either not understood or not explained in the coverage. The age of that wood tells you when a tree died. It does not tell you that the tree was part of a building. It does not tell you that the building was connected to the sonar features. And it especially cannot tell you any of that in a body of water where tidal currents are strong enough to move objects across significant distances over centuries. A 9,500-year-old piece of driftwood could have originated from a riverbank far inland, been carried into the Gulf, and settled on a seafloor that has nothing to do with the geometric shapes the sonar detected. Archaeologists said exactly this. Not fringe voices, Richard Meadow, the Harvard specialist in South Asian prehistory, explicitly offered to help conduct a proper excavation. That offer was made in early 2002 and documented in the Indian press. It was never taken up. No explanation was ever given. We are literally scratching the surface of why this matters. If stories like this, where evidence exists but investigation stops, are the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe now so you do not miss what comes next. Because the next part of this story is where it gets strange in a different way. By October 2003, NIOT conducted one more study at the site. That study was primarily a geological remote survey, using instruments at the surface. That is, as far as any available records show, the last formal scientific work done at the Gulf of Khambhat Cultural Complex. And then, 20 years of silence. This is not a story about scientists looking and finding nothing. No one looked. No marine archaeologist has ever physically descended to inspect those structures. Every claim about what is down there, and every counterclaim, is based on sonar images interpreted by engineers and objects dredged up blind. The site exists. The debate about what it is exists. But the investigation that would actually settle the question has never happened. So why didn't anyone go back? The honest answer is several things stacking on top of each other, none of them dramatic on their own. The Gulf of Khambhat has some of the strongest tidal currents in the world. Safe diving windows are narrow. Underwater excavation costs significantly more than land excavations and requires complex legal permissions. NIOT, an ocean technology body, had reached the limit of what it could do. The Archaeological Survey of India, which would normally take over, never formally did. Why not is not documented anywhere in the public record. There is also a political dimension worth naming carefully. Murli Manohar Joshi was a senior BJP politician. The announcement came at a moment when establishing the deep antiquity of Indian civilization carried significant cultural and political weight. Harvard Sanskrit scholar Michael Witzel argued directly that this episode was an example of using archaeology to rewrite history for nationalist purposes. Defenders of the research called that framing a way of dismissing legitimate inquiry as politics without engaging with it. Both things can be partially true at the same time. What is documented is this. The announcement was made by a politician, not a scientist. The institutions that would normally validate such a claim were not involved in making it, and the investigation stopped before producing any result that could be called conclusive either way. In February 2024, Prime Minister Narendra Modi descended to the seafloor near coastal Dwarka in a diving helmet and saffron robes, escorted by Navy divers, and prayed at the submerged ruins. He described it as a divine experience. He said touching the ancient city strengthened his resolve for a developed India. The visit generated enormous global coverage and happened the same day he inaugurated the Sudarshan Setu, the country's longest cable-stayed bridge, connecting Beit Dwarka Island to the mainland. 1 year later, the Archaeological Survey of India announced the revival of its underwater archaeology wing. A 5-person team began fresh surveys near Dwarka's Gomati Creek in early 2025. The ASI called it the first major exploration effort in 2 decades. That revival is focused on coastal Dwarka, the site S.R. Rao physically excavated in the 1980s, dated to the Harappan period, confirmed by divers with their own eyes. Not the Gulf of Khambhat, not the site where the 9,500-year claim came from. As of today, the Gulf of Khambhat cultural complex sits exactly where it was in 2004. Uninspected, never excavated, carbon dated by a single piece of drifted wood, described in Sonar by engineers who were not archaeologists, and formally classified in the scientific literature as unresolved. There are only 2 possibilities here, and both of them matter. Either something is down there, and the conditions that would confirm it, a controlled dive, a proper excavation, a stratified scientific analysis, have simply never been resourced in over 2 decades. Or the structures are natural geology, the wood drifted in from somewhere else entirely, and what we witnessed in 2001 was an official government announcement about the oldest city on Earth, made without adequate scientific basis, that was never properly retracted. One suggests negligence at a site of potential world historical significance. The other suggests that a government stood in front of cameras, told the world it had rewritten human history, and then quietly walked away. S.R. Rao, the man who spent 7 years diving in difficult conditions to actually verify the coastal Dwarka ruins, once said that if a fraction of the money spent on land archaeology were made available for underwater work, far more could be known. He never lived to see a proper investigation of the site that shared a name with the city he spent his career trying to confirm. The sea kept the question, and so far, no one has gone back to ask it. If that kind of story, where the evidence exists but the investigation stops, is what you come here for, hit subscribe. This channel exists to go where the record goes quiet. There's more where this came from.